She called her
Please come
lover,
now, they're
crying
humiliating me in front of
uncontrollably.
everyone.
Please come now, they're
Stay
humiliating
exactly
me
where
in
you
front of
are.
everyone. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Story's world, to my wonderful sisters, loving mothers, precious daughters, and every beautiful woman watching. Thank you for being part of this family. Before we begin, I need one small favor. Many people have been reposting my stories, and it has affected Mr. Peter Story's world. If these stories inspire you, please watch them only on this channel. Every like, comment, share, and subscription helps me continue creating heartfelt, original stories for you. Now, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for every beautiful woman watching today. Surround her with your love, fill her heart with courage, replace every worry with peace, and every disappointment with hope. Bless the work of her hands, protect her loved ones, restore what she has lost, and lead her into a season of joy, favor, and unexpected blessings. May she always feel your presence and trust your perfect plan for her life. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. The first time I ever saw Wade Turner, 3 boys were teaching him what it cost to be poor. It was September, the first full week of school, and the heat had not let go of Indianapolis yet. The blacktop shimmered. I was 7. Standing in the shade of the building with a jump rope in my hand, and across the yard 3 fifth-graders had a skinny white boy backed up against the chain-link fence. I did not know his name then. I only knew what I was looking at, because even at 7, a girl from Horville knows the shape of cruelty from a distance. His coat was the problem. That was what they had found. It was a winter coat, worn in September heat, brown corduroy, and it was 2 sizes too small, the sleeves stopping halfway up his forearms like the coat had given up on him. Anybody with sense could see why a boy wears a winter coat in September. He wears it because if he leaves it at home, he might not have it in January. The biggest of the 3, a boy named Rodney who lived over on Pershing and had failed a grade and carried it like a badge, had a fistful of that corduroy collar. "Your daddy buy this at the dump?" Rodney said. "Or the dump give it to him free?" The skinny boy did not say anything. He had gone somewhere behind his own eyes, the way you learn to do. His fists were down at his sides, closed tight, and his chin was up just enough that you could tell he had decided not to cry, and that the deciding was costing him everything he had. I do not remember making a choice. That is the truth, and I have told it the same way my whole life. My feet were moving before my mind had anything to say about it, and then I was standing in the little space between Rodney's chest and the boy in the coat, looking up a full foot into a 5th grader's face. "Leave him alone," I said. Rodney laughed. The other 2 laughed because he did. "Move, little girl." "No." I said move, and I said no. My heart was going like a rabbit's, but my voice came out flat and sure, and to this day I do not know where that voice came from. Maybe from my mother. Maybe it was always mine, and that was simply the day I found it. "If you want to hurt him, you'll have to hurt me first, and then you'll have to explain to everybody watching why a big old 5th grader had to beat up a 1st-grade girl to feel like something." The yard had gone quiet around us. Kids can smell a moment. Rodney looked at the faces gathering, and I watched him do the arithmetic, and I watched the answer come up wrong. There is no way for a boy like that to win against a small girl who will not move. Hitting me made him a monster. Walking away made him nothing. He chose nothing, but he had to spit near my shoe first to pretend it was his idea. "Ain't worth it," he said, and the 3 of them rolled off toward the basketball hoop, loud again by the time they got there, already telling themselves a different story. I turned around. The boy in the coat was staring at me like I had come down out of the sky. He had grey eyes. I noticed that first, grey like the river in November and rimmed red from the crying he had refused to do, and up close I could see that somebody had ironed that awful coat. That was the detail that got me, 7 years old, standing on hot blacktop. Somebody at his house had taken an iron to a coat that did not fit, trying to make it decent. Somebody loved him, and it was not enough, and he had to wear that fact to school every day where children could smell it. "You didn't have to do that," he said. His voice was small and rough. "I know. They're going to come back on me tomorrow." "Then I'll be here tomorrow," I said, like it was nothing, like I was telling him what day it was. I'm Nina Caldwell. I live on Keena Street. He looked at me a long moment, deciding something. Wade, he said finally. Wade Turner. The lunch bell rang. I found out at that lunch what I had already half guessed. Wade sat at the end of the table with a carton of milk and nothing else, sat there with his hands folded like a boy in church, waiting out the hour so nobody would see him not eating. My mother had packed me 2 sandwiches that morning because she said I was growing. I sat down across from him without asking, unwrapped the wax paper and put 1 sandwich down in front of him. Bologna and government cheese and yellow mustard on white bread. I'm not hungry, he said. Yes, you are. I don't take charity. It's not charity. It's a sandwich. I took a bite of mine so he would see how it was done. My mama makes 2. I can't eat 2. If I bring 1 home, she'll think I'm sick and give me castor oil. He was quiet. Then his hand came out slow, like the sandwich might be pulled away as a joke, because somewhere a joke like that had been played on him once. He ate it in 6 bites, with his shoulders curled around it. And when he finished, he looked up at me with those grey eyes, and neither of us said anything, and that was the beginning of my whole life. We walked home the same direction, it turned out. Our neighborhood ran on one tired grid, little houses shoulder to shoulder, porches sagging in the middle like old men. His street was 2 over from mine. His father was a machinist at one of the shops on the west side, and he said it with his chin up, proud, and then quieter. He said the shop kept cutting the hours, and his father came home some Fridays with a check so thin his mother would stand at the kitchen table, smoothing it with her hand, like she could iron more money into it. That was Horville then. The whole west side was like a man being let go 1 finger at a time. The fathers worked and still lost ground, and the children watched, and we all learned early that working hard and doing well were 2 different trains, and not everybody got a ticket on the second one. Why'd you really do it? Wade asked me, at the corner where his street split off. At recess, I shrugged. 3 on 1 is cheating. Everything's 3 on 1, he said, and no 8-year-old should be able to say a thing like that. But he did, and he meant it, and I understood him. Not anymore, it's not, I said. He almost smiled. The first one I ever got from him. Half of one, crooked, gone as fast as it came, and I would spend years collecting those the way other girls collected stickers. Saturday, he knocked on our door on Keena Street, hair wet-combed, and asked my mother, so polite it hurt, if I could come to the park. My mother, Lorraine Caldwell, looked at this white boy on her porch in his too small coat, looked a long moment, and I saw her see everything. The ironed corduroy, the manners somebody had drilled into him, the hunger he wore like a second skin. Back before the streetlights, she said, and gave him a biscuit for the walk, and he held it with 2 hands. Riverside Park was ours from that day. Down past the ball field stood a sycamore so old that 3 children holding hands could not have circled it, its bark peeling in patches like a map of some country nobody had discovered yet. The white river moved slow and brown beyond it. That tree became the capital city of our childhood. It was Wade's idea to bury something. He had found a flat tobacco tin, rubbed the rust off the lid till it shined a little, and he brought it to the sycamore along with a pencil stub and paper torn from a school tablet. We each write a promise, he said, and we bury it. And someday when we're grown, we dig it up and see if we kept it. What kind of promise? The forever kind. So we lay on our stomachs in the grass, guarding our papers from each other with a cupped hand like it was a spelling test. I wrote mine. He wrote his. We folded them small, and the folding felt like a ceremony, and we put them in the tin and pressed the lid down tight. He dug the hole with a flat rock between 2 roots of the sycamore, at the spot where the biggest root bent like an elbow, and we set the tin in the ground and covered it and patted the dirt down with 4 hands. Then Wade held out his little finger. No matter what happens, he said, we come back to each other. Say it. No matter what happens, I said, we come back to each other. We hooked fingers over the fresh dirt, and the river went on by, and the evening cicadas started up in the heat, and we were 7 and 8 years old and completely certain, the way you can only be certain before life has had its say. We had no idea what a promise weighs. We would find out. It would take us almost 30 years, and it would cost us more than either of those 2 folded papers could have held. But that day, under the sycamore, it weighed nothing at all. It felt exactly like a feather does the moment before the wind picks up. Chapter 2. The jacket people think a childhood is made of years. It is not. It is made of moments, maybe a dozen of them, and the years are just the string they hang on. I'm going to give you 3 of ours because everything that happened to us later was already inside them, the way the whole tree is inside the seed. The first one is the storm. We were 12 and 13, walking home from the park, and spring came over the river the way it does in Indiana, which is to say like an ambush. The sky went green at the edges. The wind arrived first, flipping the leaves silver, and then the rain came down all at once, not in drops but in sheets, the kind of rain that has weight to it, that hits your shoulders like a hand. We were on the 16th Street Bridge when it caught us, right out in the open with the white river churning brown underneath, and there was nowhere to hide and half a mile still to go. Wade took off his jacket. It was denim by then, the corduroy coat long outgrown and retired, and this one was his only jacket, and I knew it, and he knew I knew it. He put it over my head and shoulders and held the collar closed under my chin with one hand, and with the other he steered me along the rail, and he walked the whole way home in a white t-shirt with the rain beating him like a drum. "You'll catch pneumonia?" I shouted at him. "Can't," he shouted back. "Pneumonia costs money." That was Wade at 13. He had already learned to make a joke out of the thing that scared him, so it would look like it belonged to him instead of the other way around. By the time we reached Quainer Street, his lips had gone a color lips should not go, and his shirt was stuck to him so you could count his ribs, and he was shivering so hard his teeth clicked, and when I tried to give the jacket back, he stepped away from it like I was handing him a snake. "Keep it till it dries," he said. "Bring it Monday." I did not bring it Monday. I want that on the record. I told him I forgot it, and I told him that the next week too, and by the 3rd week he stopped asking, because he was too proud to ask a 4th time, and I was too far gone to give it back. I hung that jacket in my closet on a wooden hanger, all by itself at the end of the rod, and some nights, and I have never told anybody this until now, I would open the closet just to see it hanging there. It smelled like rain and cheap soap and him. Other girls my age were taping pictures of singers to their walls. I had a damp denim jacket, and I would not have traded it for the crown jewels of England. The second moment is the hospital. I was 14 when my appendix burst. It started as a stomachache during 4th period that I decided to be brave about, because in my house you did not miss school for a stomachache, and by evening I was on the kitchen floor with my knees pulled up, and my mother took one look and had a neighbor drive us to Methodist, with her hand pressed flat on my forehead the whole way, praying under her breath in the front seat. They operated that night. I remember lights sliding by on the ceiling, and my mother's face doing the thing where it stays calm on purpose, and a doctor saying the word ruptured to somebody in the hallway like it was an ordinary word. I was in that hospital 5 days, and this is the part I did not learn until later, because nobody told me while it was happening. Wade came the first night. They would not let him up. He was a scrawny white boy of 15 with no family relation, and the woman at the desk told him visiting hours were over and family only, and she must have thought that settled it. He sat down on the bench outside the main entrance, and he stayed. He stayed 3 nights. He went home when his mother made him, ate, changed, came back. He did his homework under the lights by the ambulance bay. He bought carnations from the grocery with his own money the first night, and when those wilted he picked whatever was growing in the lot off the parking garage, honest-to-God weeds, chicory and Queen Anne's lace, and held them like they were roses. The security guard, an older man named Mr. Odom, Let him be after the first night. Told him where the vending machines were. Men recognize something, I think, when they see it sitting on a bench refusing to leave. The morning they discharged me, my mother wheeled me out through the front doors into the cold early light, and there he was, asleep, sitting up, head tipped back against the brick, mouth open, a fistful of half-dead weeds still upright in his hand, like a sentry who would not put down his flag. My mother stopped the wheelchair. She looked at him a long time. "Wake him gentle," she said. I put my hand on his knee, and he came awake all at once the way boys from worried houses do, and he saw me, and I watched him check me over top to bottom in 1 second, making sure all of me was there. Then he held out the weeds. "They didn't have nothing better growing," he said. "I have been handed flowers since. Roses in tissue paper, bouquets with ribbons, arrangements that cost more than a week of groceries. I kept none of them. The chicory I pressed inside my science book, and I have it still, brown and flat as paper, and I know exactly which page. The third moment is smaller than the other two, and it is the one that matters most. It was maybe a year after that, an ordinary Sunday evening, summer. Wade had come by after finishing a yard mowing job, smelling like gasoline and cut grass, and he sat on our porch steps and ate 2 plates of my mother's food, which he only ever did after he had worked, never otherwise, because eating unearned food was against whatever constitution he had written inside himself. He and my mother talked about nothing. The Pacers. Tomatoes. He carried the trash out to the alley without being asked, said his goodnights, and went off down Caney Street with his hands in his pockets, and the streetlights came on around him one by one, like the city was lighting his way home. My mother watched him the whole way down the block. Lorraine Caldwell was not a romantic woman. She had raised me alone on a nurse's aid paycheck, and life had filed her down to what was true, and no further. She sipped her tea. "You know what that boy is," she said. "He's my best friend." She said it the way she said it in church, meaning she had heard the words and was waiting on the truth. We sat there in the dark a while. A radio was playing down the street. Then my mother said the thing I did not understand yet, the thing I would spend the rest of my life understanding. "I've known men who'd give you the shirt off their back," she said, "long as everybody was watching. That one's different. That boy would starve before he'd let you go hungry, and he'd lie to your face the whole time and tell you he already ate." She stood up and gathered her cup. At the screen door she paused. "That's the best kind there is," she said, "and the hardest, because that kind of man would rather break his own heart than show you where it hurts. You remember I said that?" I was 15. I thought she was telling me something sweet. I filed it away with the jacket and the pressed chicory, one more treasure in the museum I was quietly building. I know better now. My mother was not being sweet. My mother was reading a boy's whole future off a porch in Horville the way other people read weather, and she was warning me. A man who would starve silently before letting you go hungry is a man who will bleed silently too. He will carry a wound rather than show it to you. He will believe the worst all alone in a locked room rather than hand you his fear and ask you to hold it, because asking to a boy raised the way that boy was raised feels like begging, and he had promised himself at 8 years old, in a coat that did not fit, that he would never beg for anything again. She saw it all. Sitting there with her tea, she saw the rain and the bench and the weeds, and she saw the other thing too, far off but coming, the way you can see a storm over the river long before you feel the wind. I did not ask her what she meant. The radio played. The jacket hung in my closet in the dark, keeping its shape, keeping his shape, patient as only objects can be. I had no idea I would still have it hanging there when everything else was gone. Chapter 3. 16 and everything after. He told me under the sycamore, of course. Where else would it have been? It was October, our leaves just turning. and he had asked me to come to the park in a voice on the phone that did not sound like his voice, too careful, like a man carrying something full to the brim and trying not to spill it. When I got there, he was standing by the tree with his hands jammed in his pockets, and he had combed his hair, and that alone told me everything, because Wade Turner did not comb his hair for the White River. "I have to say a thing," he said, "and I practiced it, and I need you to let me get through it, because if you laugh, I'll walk into that river." "I won't laugh." He took a breath. "Nina, we've been friends since we were kids, and I kept waiting for it to feel like that's all it was, and it keeps not feeling like that, and I finally figured out it's never going to feel like that, because I low—" He did not get to finish the word. I did not let him. I crossed the space between us and kissed his cheek, right at the corner of his jaw, and I felt him stop breathing, and when I pulled back, his grey eyes were wide as a startled deer's. "You practiced all that," I said, "and you never once thought about what I'd say back?" "I didn't get that far." "Wade, I've been finished waiting on you since the 8th grade. And under that tree, with our old tin buried 6 feet away between the roots, the two of us started the part of our lives we had been walking toward since a hot September on a blacktop. He held my hand the whole way home like it was made of glass. He could not stop grinning, and neither could I, and that is the last purely happy scene in this story for a long while. So let it sit a moment before we go on. Then life came for us, the way it comes for everybody in a neighborhood like ours, which is to say early. I wanted nursing. I had wanted it since the 5 days at Methodist, since the night nurses who moved through the dark of that ward like they owned it, calm as lighthouse keepers. My grades were good, money was not. So I did it the long way, the Horville way, classes and clinicals stacked on top of jobs, and I will spare you the years of it, except to say that when I finally pinned on a badge at Methodist, my mother wore her church suit to a hospital cafeteria and cried into a napkin, and it remains the proudest day of my life that I was able to give her. Wade went to the plant. The stamping plant on the west side took him straight out of high school, and the day he got his badge, he walked our block like the mayor. That first real paycheck, and I want this remembered about him, he did not spend $1 of it on himself. He bought his mother a coat, a good wool coat, hip length, deep green, the kind of coat their family had never owned, and he had the store box it with tissue paper, and his mother cried into it exactly the way my mother would later cry into her napkin. The boy who wore a coat that did not fit had grown into a man who bought coats, and if that plant had held, this would be a different story and a shorter one. The plant did not hold. They announced it in winter. I do not need to tell anybody from a factory town what that morning was like. The men standing in the parking lot in their work boots, reading a single sheet of paper, and nobody talking, because there was nothing to say that the paper had not already said. The West Side had been losing shops for years, one finger at a time. Now it lost the hand. Wade's father took it worst. He had put decades into machines, and the last shop had let him go years before, and to watch his son now walk the same plank hollowed him somewhere that never filled back in. He did one thing about it, and it was the right thing. He carried his toolbox across the kitchen, the big steel chest, dented, older than Wade, every drawer packed with a lifetime of measuring and making, and he set it down at his son's feet. "They can close every door in this city," he said. "Can't nobody close your hands." Wade rented a bay off Tibbs Avenue with the last of his plant money, hung a plywood sign, and started fixing trucks. Semis limped in off the interstate, and he crawled under them in the cold and made them run. He was good, and word travels among truckers faster than freight does. Within a year he had more work than hours, and he had a dream, he told me, lying on our backs in Riverside Park, both of us staring up through the sycamore's bare branches. "The money isn't in fixing them," he said. "It's in owning one. One truck, Nina. My own freight, my own miles. Everything I ever want is one truck away." He said it like a man describing water in a desert. And then he told me the number a used one cost, even old, even tired, and the number for the down payment alone, and I heard the desert win a little in his voice. On what the Bay brought in, minus rent, minus his parents, that number was years away, and we both knew that in a neighborhood like ours, years away has a way of meaning never. So I did what I did. And I did it in secret, and you already know why, because you met him at that lunch table when he was 8. I don't take charity. He would not take it from a girl in first grade with a bologna sandwich. He would sooner have died than take it from the woman he loved. Marsh was hiring evening checkout. I took it. I was already doing hospital shifts, and I stacked the register on top, and then I found a cleaning contract downtown, offices at night, and stacked that on top of everything. I signed my name on their employment papers in a back room that smelled like cardboard, a whole stack of forms, sign here and here and here until my hand cramped. Remember that stack of signatures. It matters later more than anything else in this chapter matters. I slept in pieces. I studied on buses. I told Wade the hospital had me on nights, which was 1/3 of the truth. And every dollar that was not rent, or my mother went into a Maxwell House coffee tin on the top shelf of my closet, next to a denim jacket, and some mornings I would take the tin down and count it with my thumb, too tired to see straight, and put it back and go to work again. It took a long time. It felt like forever. And then one ordinary Tuesday I counted, and the number was there. The dealer was a lot out on the west side, and the salesman was a heavy-set man named Gill, who looked at me across his desk like women did not walk in there often. I put it to him plain. A man named Wade Turner had been coming around looking at a certain truck. When he came back, the down payment gap would be covered, prepaid, by a party who wished to stay unnamed, and if Gill ever breathed a word of who, I would have the rest of my life to make him sorry. Gill laughed until he saw I was not laughing. Then he looked at the envelope and then at me, and something in the man turned over. "He know what he's got," Gill said. "In you? He's not ever going to know. That's the whole point of this conversation." Wade came home from that lot a month later, looking like a man who had seen an angel and could not tell anyone. The gap was closed. Gill held the line, told him a party had prepaid against future hauling and wished to remain unnamed. Wade turned it over for weeks. He accused his father, who denied it flat and truthfully. He ran through old shop friends, a trucker he'd done free work for, a church fund. Every trail went cold because I had built them cold. And finally, his pride did the last part of my work for me, because digging further meant admitting he could not have done it alone, and that admission was not in him. He decided it was luck. He decided it was God. He put his hand on that hood, like a man swearing on a Bible, and let the question go. But it never left him. Understand that. A mystery you decide to stop asking is not a mystery solved. It is a room in the house with the door closed, and it waits. The morning he drove it off the lot, he had already had the door painted. Turner, white letters, plain and proud. I stood across the street, where he did not know to look for me, in my cleaning clothes, having come straight off a night shift, and I watched that truck roll out into the Indianapolis morning with his whole future inside it. And I never in my life felt richer than I did standing on that curb with holes in my shoes. He believed he did it alone. I let him believe it. Of everything I ever did for love, that kindness is the one that would come back for us. But that was still years off, waiting behind a closed door, patient as the jacket, patient as the tin under the tree. Chapter 4. The backer. Some of what I'm about to tell you, I did not witness. I learned it years later, from the one person inside that house with the courage to carry it out, and by the time she told me, it had already cost us everything it was going to cost. But a story deserves the truth, in the order the truth happened, so here it is, the way it was finally told to me. By then, Turner Freight was 3 trucks. 3. Wade said the word the way other men say their children's names. He had drivers now, a dispatcher's desk he built himself out of a door and 2 filing cabinets, and the plywood sign off Tibbs Avenue had been replaced with a metal one. We were saving for a ring. He did not know I knew that. I knew everything about that man, except the one thing that would have saved us. Carl Meade found him through a dock contract. Meade was warehouse money, old warehouse money, the kind that owns the buildings other men sweat inside. He had watched the freight coming in and out of his docks the way a fisherman watches water, and he had noticed the plain white trucks with Turner on the door, always on time, always clean, driven by men who did not look hungover. He asked around. Then he invited Wade to lunch, and then to his office, and then into his money. Understand what that meant to a boy from the West Side. Meade's backing turned 3 trucks toward 10. It meant contracts Wade could never have reached, dock space, fuel accounts, a line of credit with a real bank instead of the kind with bars on the windows. Wade came home from that first lunch lit up like Monument Circle at Christmas, and I was happy for him. God forgive me, I was so happy for him. What we could not see was the price tag, because Meade was a man who showed you the price only after you had eaten the meal. His daughter told me about the afternoon in the office. Paige Meade. Hold on to that name, because in the end, she is the reason I can tell you this story at all. She was in the doorway that day, bringing her father a signature he had asked for, and the men did not stop their conversation, because men like Carl Meade do not stop conversations for daughters. Wade was in the chair across the desk, and her father was talking about her. Not to her. About her. Paige stood in that doorway and listened to herself being described the way you describe inventory. This many years old, this education, this appearance, raised right, keeps a good home, plays tennis, and every virtue was priced and stacked and presented, and the sentence underneath every sentence was, "And she comes with the money, son." All of this can be yours together. She told me she had heard versions of that speech her whole life. What she had never seen before was what happened next. Wade turned around in his chair and looked at her. Actually looked, the way you look at a person. And he said, "You like the warehouse business, Miss Meade? Or did anybody ever ask you?" She told me the room went so quiet she could hear the ice settling in her father's glass. She was 30 years old, she said, and it was the first time a man in that office had asked her a question with a real answer required. She never forgot it. Whatever she did later, and she did the bravest thing in this whole story, it started in that doorway, with one question from a West Side boy in work boots. Meade laughed it off, but he did not let it go because men like that never let anything go, they only file it. Twice more he brought it around, smoother each time. A dinner where Wade and Paige were seated together like place cards in a plan. A Sunday invitation to the house on the water, family only, and your family now, son, aren't you? And twice Wade said his no. He said it politely because Meade held his future in a checkbook, but he said it whole. "I'm going to marry a nurse from Horville," he told Meade, the second time, and Paige heard this too from the hallway. "She fed me when I was 8 years old and nobody was watching. There's no version of my life that she's not in. I'd give the trucks back first." I did not learn he said that until it was too late for the knowing to do anything but hurt me. He'd give the trucks back first. He said that out loud in that office. Whatever you come to think of Wade Turner before this story's over, and you will think hard things, and so did I, you keep that sentence somewhere safe. I do. Meade smiled and poured the drinks and said no harm in asking, son. And Paige, who knew her father the way sailors know the sea, said the temperature in that house dropped and never came back up. He had been told no twice by a man who owed him. In her father's arithmetic, she said, that was not a refusal, that was a debt. While all of this was happening in rooms I had never seen, my own world came apart on a kitchen floor. It was a Tuesday. I had worked a day shift and stopped by Kona Street with groceries, and I knew from the porch, before my key was in the lock, because the radio was on and my mother was not singing to it. Lorraine Caldwell sang to that radio her entire life, badly and with total confidence, and the silence under the music was the loudest thing I have ever heard. She was on the kitchen floor by the stove. Her face had gone crooked. One side of it slid down like a candle, and her right hand was making a small motion against the linoleum, trying to reach something or trying to wave me toward her, and her eyes were all the way awake inside it. And that is the cruelty of a stroke that civilians do not know. The person is in there. My mother was in there looking out at me, unable to say my name. I am a nurse. I have run toward codes. I have kept my hands steady inside emergencies that would fold most people in half. None of it was worth anything on that floor. I did the right things. I called it in. I did them with hands that did not feel like mine. And the whole time, some child's voice in the back of me was saying, "Mama, Mama, Mama," in exactly the voice I had at 7. Methodist took her. The same building where she had pressed her hand to my forehead through the doors all those years ago, the same building where a boy once slept 3 nights on a bench. Now I was the one who would not leave. The stroke took her right side, and it took her speech, and the speech was the theft I could not forgive, because my mother's voice was the ruling voice of my life. And now she looked at me across a hospital bed with a lifetime of things to say and no road for them to travel. A therapist brought her a writing board, white, with a marker tied on a string. Her left hand had to learn to make the letters slow, trembling, humiliating for a proud woman, and the first word she ever wrote on it, after 2 days of refusing to try, was not a word about herself. "Eat," she wrote, and turned it around to face me, because I had not been. I moved into that hospital in every way that matters. Nights in the chair. My phone died in my coat pocket and stayed dead for a day and a half, and I did not notice. And this detail is not small. Wade called. He called and called into that dead phone during the exact days when everything was being decided about us in an office I had never seen. He came by the ward once, and they turned him away, family only, and he stood in the lobby of the same hospital that had once kept him on a bench outside, and some old wound in him heard a door closing, and he did not fight it the way the boy on the bench would have fought it. He went home. He told himself, "I needed space." Fear always finds a polite name for itself. So there we were, the two of us, at the exact wrong moment. Me, unreachable, sleeping in a chair, keeping watch over a mother learning her letters. Him, alone with his terror of losing things, 3 trucks deep into money he could not afford to offend. And across town, Carl Mead sat in his office with a folder on the desk in front of him, squaring its edges, patient. Page said he was never more pleasant than the week he was preparing to ruin someone. He called Wade in on a Friday, poured him a drink Wade did not want, talked about freight, about winter rates, about nothing, while the folder sat between them like a loaded thing. Then Carl Mead slid it across the desk and said, in the voice of a man doing an unpleasant duty, "Before you throw my family over for that girl, son, you should know what my people found." The folder sat there. Wade looked at it. The door I had built cold all those years ago, out of love and a coffee tin, the closed room, the question he had let go. He opened it. Chapter 5. The paper? What was in the folder, I would not see with my own eyes for 5 more years. But I know it now, page by page, the way you know the shape of the thing that hit you. So look at it with me. Look at it the way Wade looked at it, on a Friday evening in a warehouse office, with a drink he didn't want sweating a ring onto Carl Mead's desk. A photocopy of a check, made out to Nina Caldwell, drawn on a freight company with a name Wade half recognized, one of the outfits that had been circling his lanes since he got his 3rd truck, undercutting his rates like they could read his mind. The amount was the thing. It was almost exactly what that first truck had cost him, close enough that the number felt like a confession, and the date on it sat just ahead of the season. A mystery had walked into his life, wearing an angel's face. Behind the check, an agreement. 2 pages, typed, lawyer language. It said that Nina Caldwell had provided business information regarding Turner Freight in its early days, rate sheets, customer names, the soft insides of a small company, and had accepted consideration for it, and had agreed to keep the arrangement confidential. And at the bottom, above her printed name, a signature. My signature. My real, actual signature. The loops and the impatient little tail on the final letter lifted clean and true. Because somewhere in a back room that smelled like cardboard, years before, a tired girl, working 2 secret jobs, had signed a stack of employment forms, here and here and here, until her hand cramped. Paper outlives everything, and paper can be bought, and a signature that exists in the world can be made to say whatever a patient man with money wants it to say. Carl Meade did not shout any of this at Wade. That was never his way. Page told me he had the manner that evening of a doctor delivering bad scans. My people ran everything down before I put money in, son. Company histories, key employees, the people around you. This surfaced. I take no pleasure in it. I debated even showing you. But a man about to build something ought to know if the ground under him is what he thinks it is. Reluctance. That was the genius of it. He handed Wade the knife while appearing to have no hand on it at all, a messenger, a mourner almost, and then he sat back and let the paper do the rest, because he had studied his man. He knew about the plant closing and the father's thin Fridays. He knew what a boy like Wade was afraid of, in the basement under everything, and it was not losing money. It was being made a fool of. It was the coat that didn't fit. It was every laughing face on every blacktop, proven right at last. And the paper explained the one thing in Wade's life that had never had an explanation. I want to be fair to him here, and it is the hardest fairness of my life. Put yourself inside that man for 1 minute. There is a payment in your history that arrived like a miracle, and you asked, and every trail went cold. And you closed the door on the question because your pride would not let you keep asking. Now a folder opens, and here is an answer at last, an answer with your girl's name on it and a rival's money behind it, and the amount matches the miracle almost to the dollar. Lies do not defeat us by being strong. They defeat us by being the only answer standing in a room where the truth stayed hidden, and I am the one who hid the truth, and I hid it out of love. And Carl Meade found my kindness lying there in the dark and made a weapon of it. Wade sat with that folder for a long time, Page said. He did not rage. He went pale and quiet and asked one question, which was where this came from, and got smoke for an answer. Diligence, my people. Protected sources. Then he drove. He drove to Methodist. Of course he did. Where else does anything happen to us? I had been 3 days in the chair by my mother's bed. I came down that evening for air, out through the big doors into the dark, and it was raining. October rain. Straight down and cold. And there was a figure standing in it at the bottom of the walkway, no umbrella, not moving, and my heart did what it always did at the sight of that particular set of shoulders. It lifted. God help me. 3 days of fear, and here was my person. I came toward him, and then I saw his face, and I stopped, because it was aimed at me. Tell me about the truck money, he said. Rain between us. Behind me the hospital hummed, and 11 floors up, my mother lay learning her alphabet again with her wrong hand. What? The down payment. All of it. The whole miracle. Where did it come from, Nina? Because I just saw an answer and I need you to give me a different one. There it was. There was the door I had built, swinging open at last, in the worst rain, on the worst night, in the hands of the worst man in Indiana. And I want to tell you I understood in that moment, saw the trap, spoke the one plain sentence that would have saved us. Nobody understands anything at that speed. I only heard the accusation in it, and I had been awake for most of 3 days, and my mother was upstairs with her face slid down like a candle, and the man I loved was standing in the rain, interrogating me with a stranger's eyes. "Where did it come from?" I said. "It came from me. I earned it." "Doing what?" His voice cracked down the middle. "You were in school. I did the math driving over here, Nina. I've done nothing but math. Nights, you said. The hospital had you on nights. So tell me what I'm missing. Tell me. And I'll believe you over a piece of paper. I swear to God. Just tell me the thing that makes it make sense." And here is where I have to open my own chest for you. Because my mother told you already, back on that porch, about men who would rather break their own hearts than show you where it hurts. What she did not say is that her daughter was built the same. I had earned that money with a register and a mop, in secret, at a cost he never saw, and I had done it so that his pride would never have to kneel. And now I was being asked to prove it, to produce receipts for my own love, to beg to be believed against a paper I had never seen, by the person the whole secret had been for. Pride is a family trait on both sides of this story. That is the truest sentence in it. "If you have to ask me like this," I said, "then no answer I give you matters. That's not an answer. It's the only one you get in the rain." He stood there. The water ran off him the way it had on the bridge when we were children, when he held his own jacket closed under my chin, and some part of me was seeing that boy, and some part of him, I know now, was seeing a folder. 5 sentences. I have counted them my whole life since. 5 sentences between the doors of that hospital and the end of 12 years. "Then I guess I got my answer," he said. That was the 5th one. He walked to his truck. I watched him do it. I could have called out 1 syllable, his name, and I have lain awake for years inside that syllable I did not say. But I was proud, and I was gutted, and I was somebody's daughter before I was anybody's anything. And I turned around and walked back through the doors, and rode the elevator up 11 floors, and sat down in the chair, and took my mother's ruined right hand, and I did not cry because she was watching, and neither of us cried where the other could see. Her left hand moved for the board. She wrote 1 word and turned it to me. "Wade." I looked at my mother a long time. "He had to go, Mama," I said. She looked back at me the way she looked at Sunday liars, but her hand was tired and the marker slipped, and whatever she meant to write next stayed inside her with everything else the stroke had locked up, and I will always wonder if it was the sentence that would have sent me running down 11 flights into the rain. Here is the last thing, and then this chapter can be over, because I have carried it far enough. The proof existed. My name, my hours, my pay, every register shift and every mopped floor, all of it sat in employment files in the back offices of a grocery chain, the same files my true signature had been stolen out of, and that chain was already dying. Within months, the stores were shuttered, the signs came down all over Indiana, and somewhere the files went into boxes, and the boxes went wherever dead companies' papers go. The lie was on good stock, in a rich man's drawer, patient. The truth was in a bankrupt company's basement, and the rain that night washed nothing clean at all. Chapter 6. 5 Empty Years. I am not going to walk you through 5 years the slow way. Grief has no calendar worth reading. I will tell you what those years built, in his life and in mine, because the years were builders even while they were thieves, and what they built is what came crashing together at the end of them. Start with him, because his part is easier to say. Wade Turner poured himself into the only vessel he had left. Work does not ask where the truck money came from. Work does not stand in the rain with a stranger's eyes. He gave Turner freight the hours a man gives a marriage, and then the hours a man gives a religion, and the company grew the way things grow when they are fed on everything a person has. The freight world ran hot in those years, and he expanded into the heat. And when the market turned cold and other carriers went under, he bought their trucks at auction with cash he had refused to spend on any joy. By the 5th year, the plain white trucks with Turner on the door were on every interstate out of Indianapolis, and trade papers wrote about him, the West Side mechanic who built one of the biggest independent fleets in the state, and men who would not have hired his father to sweep now waited on his phone calls. He never took Carl Meade's money. That detail reached me years later, and I had to sit down when it did. After the folder, after the rain, he walked away from the backing anyway, walked away from the man who had shown him the paper, and built it all without him, alone, out of spite and grief, which are the two strongest materials known to man. Meade had destroyed us for nothing. He did not even get the son-in-law. I don't know if that is comfort or just arithmetic. Some nights it is one, some nights the other. And every March, in the week of my birthday, flowers came to my door. No card, no name. A different arrangement every year, but always. Somewhere in it, chicory. And you cannot buy chicory from a florist. It is a weed, which means every year somebody stood in a shop on Massachusetts Avenue and asked for a weed to be put in among the roses and paid extra for it, and walked away without leaving a name. I knew by the 2nd year. Of course I knew. I never called the shop. He never wrote the card. 5 birthdays, 5 bouquets, 2 proud fools, and a weed that meant everything, standing in water on my kitchen table while neither of us picked up a phone. Anonymous was the coward's way. He said that himself much later, and he was right, and so was I, for keeping a jacket 17 years and calling it closure. Now, my 5 years. They are harder to say because his were empty and full of money, and mine were empty and full of everything else. I became the nurse they call. Every unit has one, the name that gets said when a night is going wrong, and at Methodist on my floor the name was mine. I took the worst assignments and the sickest patients. I trained the new ones. I held the hands of the dying when families could not get there in time. And I was good. I was so good. Because the work was the one place my love had anywhere to go. You can pour yourself out over strangers. It keeps you alive. It does not keep you warm. And underneath the work, quiet as water under a house, the money was rising. Nobody warns you what survival costs. My mother lived, and I will never stop thanking God. And living is the most expensive thing a body can do in this country. The care she needed, the therapy to fight her way towards speech, the equipment, the modifications to the house, and behind all of it, the bills from the first catastrophe itself, arriving and arriving in their windowed envelopes long after the sirens were forgotten. I fought them the way I knew from the inside. I appealed and negotiated and made payments like a woman bailing a boat, and still the water rose, and the year came when the debt reached the house itself, a lien against the little house on Queen Street, my mother's whole life's work, the porch where she had read a boy's future in the dark. And after that, I did not sleep so much as practice for it. Into all of this, with beautiful manners, came Neil Rowan. He was on the hospital's board side of the world, a Rowan of Meridian Hills, which in Indianapolis means old money that no longer remembers being new. We met at a fundraiser the unit made me attend, and he found me again after. And I want to be fair to Neil, fairer maybe than he was ever brave. He was intelligent and courteous and calm. He never once made me feel bought in the beginning. He came to a Sunday dinner and was decent to my mother, read her board patiently, told her stories that made her eyes crease, and my mother, who had once read Wade Turner in a single evening, wrote nothing on her board that night, which I took for approval. It was not approval. I know that now. It was a woman with one working hand choosing her battles. He courted me for a year, steady as a payment plan. And somewhere in that year, gently, the way his people do everything, it was made known to me that the Rowan family looked after its own, that debts and liens were the sort of weather they knew how to change, that my mother could have the best of everything and the house could be safe. All of it said sideways, at dinners. In that language, where nothing is ever offered so nothing can ever be refused. You young ones will judge me here. Go ahead. I am 50 pages past caring, and there is only truth left. When Neil Rowan proposed to me in a restaurant with linen tablecloths, with a ring that had been his grandmother's, I looked at that ring and I did not see love, and I did not pretend to. I saw 11 floors of a hospital. I saw my mother's porch staying my mother's porch. I saw a decent, careful man offering me a life with no rain in it, and I saw a birthday bouquet with a weed in it standing on my kitchen table, wilting like it did every year, from a man who in 5 years had never once knocked on my door. I was tired. Understand that word the way nurses understand it. Yes, I said. Neil smiled and put the ring on my hand, and it fit perfectly, because he was a man who checked measurements in advance, and the table next to us applauded strangers, and I smiled at them, and I have seen that smile since in one other place, on patients being brave for their families, and if you ever see it on a woman being proposed to, do something. Nobody did. My mother looked at the ring a long moment when I showed her. Then she looked up at me, one whole eye and one drooping one, both of them seeing all the way through me, the way they had my entire life. Her left hand went to the board. I watched her write, slow, the letters wobbling. "Happy," she wrote, and turned it to me. "He's good to me, Mama." She kept looking. Then she wiped the board with her sleeve and wrote again, longer this time, working at it, and turned it around. That's not what I asked. I told her happiness was for people whose houses weren't under liens. I said it lighter than that. I made it a joke. And my mother did not laugh, and we did not speak of it again. But that night, passing my own closet, I stopped, the way you stop at a grave. The jacket hung where it had hung for 17 years, at the end of the rod, in the dark, holding its shape. I did not take it down. I closed the door. There are 2 kinds of closing a door, and by then I knew both of them from the inside. The engagement went into the world, and the world approved. The hospital approved, the board approved, Meridian Hills approved, with the special warmth people reserve for what they privately doubt. His mother called me lovely twice, the way you praise a rug. And in the spring, the invitation arrived to make it all official before their own kind, thick cream cardstock engraved, the paper alone worth more than my week's groceries. The pleasure of your company is requested at a dinner in honor of the engagement of Neil Rowan and Nina Caldwell. The Columbia Club, Monument Circle. I stood in our narrow hallway on Kona Street, holding that heavy cream card, under the ceiling stain we never could afford to fix. Wallpaper peeling at the seam by the door, the way it had peeled since I was a girl. And the card was so white and the hallway was so tired, and I remember the exact thought that crossed my mind, clean as type. They are going to look at me all night, I thought, and some part of them is going to be checking whether I match the china. I did not know the half of it. What I did not know, what nobody at that dinner but God and one dead man's files could have told me, was that a lie with my name on it had been living in those people's world for 5 years, seeded and watered by Carl Mead himself, waiting patient as paper. I pinned the invitation to the kitchen corkboard, and I went to work, and the snow began early that year. Chapter 7. The Estate. Carl Mead died in the winter, in his sleep, in the house on the water, and the newspapers called him a pillar. The obituary mentioned his warehouses, his giving, his beloved children. It did not mention us. Pillars never have to answer for what they were built on. What follows I have from Paige, told to me across a table months later with her hands wrapped around a coffee she never drank, and I am going to tell it the way she told it, because she earned the telling. The heirs began fighting before the ground settled. There was a brother, Carl's son, cut from the father's cloth but without the father's patience, and there were lawyers, and there was the machinery that starts up around serious money when its owner stops breathing. And in the middle of the machinery, there were the files. A dead man's papers all have to be gone through when estates are contested. Every drawer gets opened. That is the one mercy built into the whole cold process. Money forces daylight into rooms that money kept dark. Paige took the office. She volunteered for it, told the lawyers she would inventory her father's personal files herself, and her brother let her because it looked like grief and saved him tedium. It was not grief. She had spent her whole life being priced by that man, and she went into his office the way you go through enemy ground, looking for the truth about her own history. She found ours instead. It was in a fireproof drawer, in a folder with no label, and the first thing her hand came to was the check. Nina Caldwell. The freight company name she did not recognize until she found, clipped behind it, the invoice. Because her father had kept the invoice. From the men he paid to build the lie, itemized, dated, filed, the way he kept receipts for everything, document services rendered, and behind that the working papers themselves, the practice runs of my stolen signature, traced over and over off a photocopied grocery store form until the hand had it right. Sheets of my own name repeated like lines written by a child being punished, except the punishment was mine. She said she sat on the floor of his office for an hour. She said the thing that undid her was not the forgery. It was the keeping. He had not even needed to keep it. The keeping meant he liked to open that drawer sometimes and look at his work. And there was more, because her father never used a tool once, filed with it, letters, notes in his own hand, the social ledger of a patient man. He had seeded the story. In the years after, whenever the Turner name came up in his circles, at the club, on his boards, he had let it drop, regretful, confiding, that he'd once nearly backed young Turner before the diligence turned up the business with the girlfriend, paid off by a competitor, you understand? Hushed up, sad thing. Fine head for freight, though. A lie told once in the right rooms in this city does not need telling twice. Meridian Hills is a small world with a long memory and no appetite for checking. For 5 years I had been walking around Indianapolis with a brand on my back that I could not see and no one would name to my face. Paige carried the folder home. And here this story owes you the scene that makes her real, because courage without cost is just theater. Her brother came to her house that night, about the inventory, and found her at the kitchen table with the folder open. He read for 2 minutes and understood everything and went pale, and what he said she repeated to me word for word, because it deserved preserving in its awfulness. Burn it. Tonight. The estate is wide open, Paige. If this surfaces, that Caldwell woman has claims against everything, the lawyers will feast for years, and half of what's coming to you and me goes to fixing what a dead man did. You'd be paying for his sin out of your own inheritance. Is that what you want? To be poorer for the rest of your life, over a nurse you've never met? And Paige Mead looked at her brother across their father's handiwork and said, I've met her once, actually. I stood in a doorway while Daddy sold me to a man who turned out to love her. He was the only person in that office who ever asked me a question. So yes, that's exactly what I want. Poorer is the correct price for our name, and I am tired of what our name costs everyone else. He told her she was a fool. He was still telling her while she walked him out. In the morning she made copies, took the originals to a lawyer of her own choosing with instructions no brother could reach, and then she got in her car and drove west across the city, out of Meridian Hills, down into the flat working streets her father's obituary had never heard of, to a freight yard where plain white trucks stood in rows, and asked at the counter for Wade Turner, and would not give her business to anyone else. He knew her the moment he saw her. She said his face went careful, the way it would, seeing a Mead. She put the folder on his desk and said, My father lied to you. It's all in there, and I'm sorry it took a funeral. The originals are with my lawyer, and they're yours whenever you want them. She never took anything from anyone, Mr. Turner. It was purchased, all of it. There's an invoice. She told me what happened to him then, and I have decided you should have it, though it is hard for me to give. He read standing up. She said his hands were steady on the first page, the check, and steady on the second, and then he came to the sheets of practiced signatures, my name traced over and over by a stranger's hand, learning to be me. And that was the page where Wade Turner stopped being steady. He sat down slowly like a man who had been shot somewhere that had not started hurting yet. And he said quietly, not to Paige, not to anyone. She was working 2 jobs. That was the answer. That was the whole answer, and it was good. The truck money. He had solved it at last, 5 years too late, sitting in his own freight office with a dead man's receipts. Every dollar of his beginning, the whole miracle, a tired girl with a register and a mop, and he had stood in the rain and demanded she confess to a crime when the truth underneath was that she had built him silently and asked for nothing, and he had repaid her with a stranger's eyes. Paige said he asked her one question, where is she now? And Paige, who belonged to the world where such things are known, had to be the one to tell him. Engaged. A Rowan, of the Meridian Hills Rowans. Dinner at the Columbia Club within the month, the whole world invited. The same hour, you understand. The same hour he learned I had been innocent all along. He learned I was promised to someone else. If Carl Meade was watching from wherever men like that go, that hour was his last good laugh. Wade went home that night and wrote me a letter. He told me this himself, later, under a tree. He wrote it and read it and heard how it sounded, a rich man interrupting an engagement with apologies, and he burned it in the kitchen sink. He wrote a second one that was all facts, the folder, the invoice, the proof, and burned that too, because facts were what he had believed instead of me the last time. The third was 1 line long, and he burned it fastest of all. The fourth he did not burn. The fourth he put in his coat pocket, where it stayed, because he could not learn an address for good news, the way he had once driven to a hospital with bad. He had believed a paper over my word. What right, he kept asking himself, does such a man have to knock on her door with a different paper and expect it to matter? So the truth sat in his coat, and the lie sat in Meridian Hills, and the snow came down on Indianapolis, and everything drifted toward the Columbia Club. Me? I knew none of it. My week before the dinner was fittings and shifts and my mother's therapy schedule. But I have one more thing to tell you, and then you may judge how blind I was, because 2 nights before the dinner, I stopped being able to say I had not been warned. It was a paper of my own that did it. Neil's family had settled matters, as promised, the lien, the worst of it, and I'd been grateful in the numb way of drowning people pulled aboard anything. That night, looking for our insurance documents in the folder Neil's family attorney had sent, I found the instrument behind the settlement, and I read it, and then I read it again standing up. It was not a gift. Nothing had been given. It was a loan, papered properly, with my name on it as borrower, and terms that began upon marriage, discreet and airtight, and I sat down at my mother's kitchen table under the peeling wallpaper and understood, with a clarity that arrived like cold water, that I had not been rescued at all. I had been secured, like a debt, like freight. The jacket hung in the closet behind me, 17 years patient, and the dinner was in 2 days, and the snow kept falling, and none of us, not one of us, knew we were all walking toward the same room. Chapter 8. The Coat Room. The Columbia Club sits on Monument Circle like it has been sitting there since before your family got to town, because it has, and it wants you to feel that in your spine walking in. Marble and dark wood and portraits of men looking down at you with the patience of people who own the walls. It was snowing when we arrived, fat, slow flakes falling past the monument's lights, and Neil helped me out of the car, and I remember thinking the circle looked like the inside of one of those glass globes you shake, beautiful and sealed. I had bought a dress I could not afford, and my mother had watched me leave the house in it, and written one word on her board as I bent to kiss her. Proud, it said. She meant of me. I carried that word in with me like a coin in my shoe. 40 guests, give or take, in a private dining room upstairs. Silver, candles, name cards in calligraphy. I had met perhaps a dozen of them before. The Rowans en masse are a weather system, pleasant and cold at once, and I moved through the cocktail hour being introduced and appraised. And I caught it then, if I am honest, the thing in some of the glances, a knowingness, eyes that touched me and slid to each other. I told myself it was the usual arithmetic, Horville doing math against Meridian Hills. I had been underestimated my whole life. I knew how to stand inside it. I did not know they thought they knew something. The dinner was long, and the toasts began with dessert. Neil's father spoke, dry and brief. A cousin was funny. And then Neil's mother rose, tapping her glass in pearl grey, holding not a glass, but a small leather folio, and the room settled, and something in the back of my neck stood up before my mind knew why. "Too welcoming someone into a family," she said, smiling. "One likes to truly know them, and we are a thorough family." Light laughter. "So, in the spirit of thoroughness and of new beginnings, I thought we might all get to know our lovely Nina a little better." And she opened the folio and read. She read my address, read Quainer Street aloud to that room, slowly, letting the vowels do her work, and then the name of my block and a delicate word about its history. She read my debts. She read my debts. Dressed as sympathy, poor thing, what she has carried, the amounts implied if never quite spoken, my mother's illness served up as colour. She read my jobs, the register, the mop, offices at night, imagine, and the room made the sound polite people make instead of gasping, and I sat with my spine straight and my hands in my lap and did what I had done on a blacktop at 7 years old. I did not move. I told myself, they can read your whole life out loud, and it is still a life you are not ashamed of. There is nothing in that folder that is not survival. Hold, girl, hold. And then she turned the page and stopped pretending it was a toast. "And of course," she said gently, so gently, "there is the matter one hesitates to raise. But we are among family. My dear, you would agree, wouldn't you, that a woman who once accepted money from a business rival of the man she claimed to love and signed her silence away, quite officially, ought at least to be forthcoming about it before taking a family's name? We do have the paperwork. It made the rounds years ago, I'm afraid. Poor Carl Mead saw it himself. It's rather famous in certain rooms." The room did not gasp. That was the worst of it. The room nodded. 40 faces turned to me with the settled look of people having a rumour confirmed at last, and I sat there inside my bought dress and understood, in one falling instant, that they had all walked in already believing it, that I had been convicted years ago in rooms I had never entered, by paper I had never seen, and that this dinner had never been a welcome. It was a sentencing. She had simply decided to read the verdict aloud. I looked at Neil. "I want you to understand that everything still hinged, right there on that one look. A word from him. Half a word. He was my fiancé and he knew me, and all he had to do was stand up." Neil Rowan looked into his wineglass and said nothing. I do not remember standing. I remember the napkin sliding off my lap, and someone's little laugh, quickly swallowed, and the long, long walk past the candles with every eye on me and my heels too loud on their floor, and a hallway and a door, and then I was in the coat room, among the furs and cashmere of people who despised me, with my back against the wall, sliding down it, and the sobs came up out of me from a place I had kept locked since a rainy night outside a hospital, ugly, tearing, the kind you cannot dress up. And my hands were already doing what my hands had decided long before I did. Phone out, screen swimming, not Neil's name, not any Rowan's name. My thumb went where it had wanted to go for 5 years, to the one number I had never deleted, that I had carried through every march and every bouquet, and it was ringing, and he answered before the second ring finished, as if he had been holding the phone for 5 years too. "Nina?" His voice. After 5 years, just my name, and it broke whatever was left standing in me. "Please come now," I sobbed into the coats of Meridian Hills. "They're humiliating me in front of everyone. Please, Wade, please come now." "Where?" Not a question. A door opening. I got out the words Columbia Club and heard, before the call cut, a truck engine already turning over. What happened next? The room told and retold for years, and for once the gossips, and I agree on every detail. He came exactly as he was. He had been in the yard among his trucks, and he walked into the Columbia Club in a canvas work coat with the snow still on his shoulders, past a man at the front desk who made the mistake of starting a sentence, up the stairs and into that dining room like weather arriving. 40 dinner jackets turned, and Wade Turner crossed the silence, every eye on him, straight to where I stood frozen by the coat room door, and turned around and put himself between me and the entire room. The image, the whole story had been promising you. There it was. The boy from the blacktop, grown, standing in front of me one more time, and for one whole breath I felt 7 years old and completely safe. One breath. That is what we got. Because then he spoke, and the truth came with him, and the truth had not come to rescue me. Truth doesn't work for anybody. "Whatever they told you tonight," he said to me, quiet, urgent, his back to all of them. "The paper is a forgery. I have proof, Nina. Meade bought it. The check, the signatures, all of it. There's an invoice, do you hear me? He built it to break us and it worked. And I believed it for 5 years. And you were only ever, all along, the girl who fed me. I found out, and I couldn't even knock on your door. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." And the floor went out of the world. Because do you see what he had just handed me? Not comfort. Arithmetic. 5 years. The rain, the stranger's eyes, the birthdays with no card, my mother writing, "Wade," with her one good hand, the ring on my finger from a man staring into wine. This entire room and its verdict, all of it, every hour of it, purchased with a forged check and made possible by the man in front of me, choosing a piece of paper over 12 years of me. The lie had not only stolen my past, it had been walking ahead of me my whole life, salting every room before I entered it, and the 2 men who could have stopped it were both in this building, and one had believed it, and one had let it be read aloud. I looked at Neil, still seated, wineglass empty now. I looked at Wade, snow melting on his shoulders, 5 years too late with the truth in his coat pocket. "You want to know the worst thing either of you ever did to me?" I heard myself say to both of them. To the room, my voice wrecked and level at once. "You both had all the proof of me anybody should ever need. Me, and you both went with the paperwork." I took the coat that was mine off its hanger, the only cloth coat in a room of furs, and I put it on myself, because no one was ever going to hold a collar closed under my chin again, and I walked out, past him, past the candles and the calligraphy and the portraits, down the marble stairs, out the doors of the Columbia Club, and into the snow on Monument Circle alone. The circle stood white and quiet, the monument going up into the falling dark with its lights on, and the snow came down on my face and my bought dress, and I stood in the middle of that sealed glass globe of a city where nobody could hear anything, and nobody followed me, because I had left nothing behind me that I wanted, and that, of everything, is the picture to keep from this night. A woman alone in the snow, in the center of the city, rescued by no one. Chapter 9. Her own hands. I walked the circle twice that night in the snow, and then I took a cab home to Coney Street, and my mother was awake, because mothers know. She took one look at me in the doorway, snow in my hair, mascara gone, and her left hand reached for the board, and I said, "Not tonight, Mama. Tonight just sit with me." And Lorraine Caldwell put the board down and put her good arm around her daughter, and we sat on the couch in our coat's worth of silence until the furnace kicked on. And somewhere in that hour, without one word being available to either of us, I stopped grieving and started deciding. Here is what I decided. Nobody was coming to save me, and thank God. because everyone who had ever tried to file me, price me, rescue me, or ruin me had used paper to do it. Fine. I had spent my whole life learning to read the machines everyone else found unreadable. It was time to work the paper myself. I started with the Rowans, because the freshest wound cleans easiest. I called Neil's mother, not Neil, and invited myself to lunch at the Meridian Hills house, and she accepted out of pure curiosity, I imagine, wondering what the nurse could possibly want. I came on my day off, in my good coat, and I sat at that long dining table where I had once auditioned for them, and I put two things on the wood between us: the grandmother's ring and the loan. The ring is Neil's, I said. The other one is mine, and I've read it now, all of it, which I should have done before I let gratitude do my reading for me. You didn't help my family. You collateralized it. So here is what will happen. The settlement your money made stands because my mother's house is not a chip in this game, but every dollar of it comes back to you from me, on a schedule my lawyer will send you, with interest at the rate in your own document. I looked after dying strangers for years to buy back a truck for a man once. Believe that I can outwork a debt to people I don't respect. Neil had come into the doorway partway through. He stood there the way he sat at that dinner, present and useless, and when his mother swept out with her composure, clutched around her like the pearls, he finally found his voice, and what it said was this: "Nina, for what it's worth, I would have stopped them eventually." I picked up my coat and looked at this careful, decent, hollow man. "Eventually," I said, "is the same word as never, dressed up for dinner." He did not argue. Accuracy was the only thing I ever got from Neil Rowan for free, and he knew a true sentence when it hit him. I let myself out past the portraits, and I have never been back, and I drove home with the window cracked in January because I wanted the cold. I wanted to feel the exact temperature of my own life, with nobody adjusting the thermostat on my behalf. The lie came next, and the lie was bigger than the Rowans. The lie had my name on it, and a dead man's fingerprints and a 5-year residency in every room that mattered in this city. And if I had learned anything at that dinner, it was that a lie left standing gets read as a toast eventually. Wade called that week. I let it ring. He came to the yard gate of my composure a dozen ways, messages, a letter, and the letter I read, I will admit that, the fourth letter, the one he had carried in his coat, and it was not eloquent, and it did not defend him. It just told me where the proof lived, and said the word sorry the way you say it at funerals. He offered, in that letter, to stand up everywhere, to tell the club, the boards, the city, to spend whatever it took correcting every room his believing had helped poison. I called him for the first time then. One call short, and I will give it to you whole. I got your letter, don't do it. Nina, let me fix what I can fix, please. I am begging you. That's the problem, Wade. You standing up in those rooms saying she was innocent, that's just the same system running in reverse. My name in men's mouths, my character decided by whoever spoke last. No, you don't get to be my proof. I have my own. And I did. Paige Mead had left the originals with her lawyer, and word that Nina Caldwell could reach them any time, and I reached them. I sat in a lawyer's office downtown, and for the first time I looked with my own eyes at the check, the agreement, the pages of my signature practiced by a stranger's hand, and I want to tell you I was calm, but my hands shook like the paper was hot, and the lawyer had the grace to look out the window a while. Then we went to work. A sworn statement, my statement in my words, entered into the estate's proceedings, where the whole world of Meads and their lawyers had to receive it. Formal, permanent, on the record, in the same legal machinery that was dividing up Carl Mead's money, a correction filed into the very estate of the man who built the lie. Paige stood behind every word, at a documented cost to her own inheritance that her brother has never forgiven and she has never once mentioned. The claims got resolved the way such things do, quietly, with signatures, and I asked for exactly one thing beyond the truth being lodged, where it could never be erased. And I got it, and it is nobody's business, and it went to my mother's care, every cent. The rooms that had believed the toast heard the correction the way such rooms do, sideways at lunches. I did not attend. I was working. Because there was still the house and the debt that remained beyond the Rowan settlement, and I want this part told plainly, with no shine on it, because somebody watching this has a windowed envelope on their kitchen table right now. There was no miracle. I sat down with the hospital's own financial counselors in the building where I have given 20 years, and I fought the newest of the billing the way you actually can, through their assistance process, with every form correct, and I won that one small fight because I knew the machine from inside it. The older debt, the deep one, my lawyer negotiated down to a settled number, released, finished, and I am paying it off month by month, and will be for years, and I do not mind, because every payment is mine, owed to no family, secured against no marriage, a debt with my own name on it being killed by my own hand. That is what saving yourself looks like. It is not a convoy of cars. It is a payment schedule and your own signature, given freely for once, and I have never signed anything more proudly, which leaves Wade, and the part of this chapter I can still hardly tell. He asked to see me, and I said not yet. So he did the other thing, the thing I did not ask for and did not expect, and I only know it happened because I came home early one evening and there was a work truck out front, and through the front window I saw him, sitting at my mother's kitchen table, across from Lorraine. He had come to her first, not to me, to her, the woman who had fed him at 8 years old, who had read his whole future off a porch, who had written "Wade" with her one good hand on the worst night of my life. And I stood on my own snowy walk, looking through the glass like a stranger at my own life, and I watched Wade Turner, who owns half the trucks in Indiana, sit at that little table and own something much heavier. I could not hear it. I did not need to. I watched him talk a long time, no excuses in his posture, his hands flat on the table like a man showing he was carrying nothing, and I watched my mother's face, still crooked, listen with both of the lifetime she has lived. When he finished, she looked at him for a long moment, then her left hand went to the board, and she wrote, slow, the letters wobbling the way they do, and turned it around to face him. One word. Eat. The word she had written me on her second day back from the dead. The word that meant, in the whole language of Lorraine Caldwell, you are still at my table. And I watched a man put his face in his hands at my mother's kitchen table and shake, and I stood in the snow and let them have it, that moment, because it was theirs. When he came out and found me on the walk, we stood in the cold a distance apart, all the snow of Indianapolis coming down between us, and he did not reach for me, and he knew better than to try. Your mother is more than I deserve, he said. She always was. Both of us. Nina. His voice went down to the boy's voice. Tell me what I can do. And I gave him the terms, and they were the truest sentence I had left. You don't get the girl back, I said. She's gone, Wade. 5 years of rooms killed her. But the woman who's standing here, the one who saved herself, you can meet her. If you're patient, if you're honest, you can meet the woman. He nodded in the snow, slow, like a man accepting a fair price. When do we start? He said. Chapter 10. The tin. We started slow, the way I said. Coffee first, in public, like strangers, which in every way that counted we were. Then walks. He met the woman, and I will tell you a secret. The woman liked him better than the girl ever did, because the woman had seen the price of him, all of it, and he paid it every week without being watched, which is the only way paying counts. He sold nothing and gave nothing away, and I would not have wanted him to. But he came to therapy appointments and learned to read my mother's board faster than the therapists. He stopped the March flowers like he promised and started something else. He shows up on the birthday itself now, at the door, in daylight, with chicory he pulls from the lot behind his own freight yard, a weed in his fist, and his name on his face. Anonymous was the coward's way. His words, "The bravest men I have known were all cowards who got tired of it." It took us more than a year to go back to the tree. Spring again, the park gone green, the white river running high and brown with the melt. The sycamore stood where it has stood for 100 years, bigger than our childhood, bark still peeling in patches like a map of some country nobody had discovered yet. And I understood at last that the undiscovered country was this one. Here, now. The far side of everything. He brought a trowel. We knelt at the bent root like two people praying, which maybe we were, and he dug where two children had patted the dirt with 4 hands, and the tin came up out of the ground the way the truth comes up, rusted, dented, smaller than memory, and completely intact. He could not open it. His hands would not work. I opened it. 2 folded papers, damp-spotted, the pencil gone faint as breath. We unfolded his first. "I promise if Nina is ever hungry, she gets my food first, even if it's all the food I have. Forever. Wade Turner, age 8. Spelled wrong, sworn right. I read it twice and could not read it a third time out loud. Then mine, in the careful fat letters of a girl who had just learned cursive and did not trust it yet. I promise to always stand in front of Wade when the mean ones come, no matter how big they are." Nina Caldwell, age 7. We sat back on our heels in the grass, holding our own small handwriting, and I started to laugh, and then I was not laughing, and neither was he, because do you see what those 2 children had done? They had written the whole story. Every word of it came true. He starved himself of me for 5 years rather than come to my door with less than the truth. And the mean ones came, bigger than Rodney, bigger than we could have dreamed, with folders and calligraphy, and when they came, I stood in front of him, in front of us, at a table in Meridian Hills and a lawyer's office downtown, and I did not move. We had kept the promises. We had kept them so hard, they nearly killed us. We had only ever broken the one we made out loud, the one about coming back, and even that one, was only running late. "Ask me," I said, there in the grass. He did not kneel, because we were both already kneeling, which is the truest way anyone has ever been proposed to. He took my hand in the dirt over the empty hole, and he asked me with the tin lying open between us, and I said what the girl would have said and what the woman had verified. We married small in June at my mother's church on the west side, 40 people who had earned their chairs. Paige Mead sat on the bride's side, where she belonged. Gil from the truck lot cried, enormous in a suit, and told anyone who would listen that he had kept the secret 19 years, and it was the best work of his life. My mother came down the aisle on Wade's arm, her cane in her other hand, and she had worked with her therapist for months, in secret, both of them sworn like Gil, on 3 words. And at the front of that church, before God and Horville, Lorraine Caldwell steadied herself and took her time and said, out loud, in a voice the stroke had bent but could not keep, "About time, boy." The church came apart. It is the only applause in this story, and it was for her. We live on Koiner Street. He would have built me anything. And I chose the house with the porch, paid off now, every payment mine, the deed in a drawer where I can look at it, which I do, more than I will admit. The jacket does not hang in the closet anymore. It came off its hanger at last, 17 years of patience rewarded, and it hangs by the front door now, on the hook, where a jacket belongs, where anyone can grab it going out into the rain. And the tin sits on our windowsill, open, empty, its work done. People ask me, women mostly, at the hospital, at church, what the lesson is. They want it to be about the money, or the club, or the look on that woman's face when my statement was filed. It is not. Here is the lesson, the whole of it, and then I am done, because the porch light is on, and he is out there with my mother, losing to her at cards, and I am wanted. Paper is patient, but so is love. The difference is what they are patient for. paper waits in drawers to be believed. Love waits on porches, in closets, under trees, in coffee tins, in a weed folded into roses, waiting not to be believed but to be seen, and it does not curdle while it waits, and it does not charge interest. Believe the person, believe the person. The paperwork can be forged, the room can be rented, the toast can be bought, and the verdict planted years ahead of you. But nobody ever forged a boy on a bench for 3 nights running, and nobody ever counterfeited a girl who would not move. We were 7 and 8 when we learned everything that matters. It took us 30 years to learn that we had learned it. No matter what happens, we come back to each other. We were only ever late. We were never lost.